We have Mark Toro here with North American Properties, and we're talking a little bit about this project so you get some more of the history and more of the changes that North American made when it acquired the property. So Mark, could you tell us a little bit about the background of your company, and then we can get to Atlantic Station?
Sure. North American Properties is a 60-year-old company based in Cincinnati. I founded the Atlanta office in '96. We have been engaged in multifamily and retail primarily. We put about 19 million square feet of retail on the ground and 15,000 or so residential units. We've currently got 3,200 units of residential in the works, and about $550 million worth of development, including mixed use and retail, underway.
Okay. Now, North American wasn't necessarily the original developer of this property. You, if I'm correct, you purchased it later in its life. We can start with either the history of this property and how it started under development, or how North American came to purchase it and why.
Well, I'd like to start with the genesis of Atlantic Station. A gentleman by the name of Jim Jacoby, a visionary developer in Atlanta who had acquired the rights to develop a steel site. This was a steel mill called Atlantic Steel. Very high profile project, as you can imagine, just by virtue of its location, and did a phenomenal job working through enormous regulatory hurdles, including the construction of the 17th Street Bridge across the connector. Lots of federal funding, lots of brownfield remediation funding efforts. Did a tremendous job. We came to acquire it through a confluence of events, that kind of the perfect storm that was occasioned, I guess, by the great real estate abyss. We, in 2008, essentially shut down our development machine nationwide after 25 years of a full tilt boogie, ground up, mostly suburban retail and multifamily program. And at that same time, I moved from a suburban lifestyle, moved into town. I live in the fourth building from the right over our shoulder here, and became well acquainted with what Atlantic Station was about as a patron and as a neighbor. And Atlantic Station was offered for sale by AIG, who was struggling globally, as we all know. And it was part of the Too Big to Fail program. Offered Atlantic Station for sale. We had the opportunity to acquire it at a significant discount, which gave us room to operate and really now have the opportunity for this city within a city to realize its potential.
And the mixed-use projects that I've covered, it always seems like a mixed-use project is pioneering in a sense, because there's so many different components to it, and it's very difficult to get every single component right the first time. So I imagine when you came in, there were some aspects that were working and some that weren't. So what did you identify offhand immediately that needed to be fixed?
Well, I think when we came in, there were not many of the components that were working well at all. The property was generally perceived to be struggling. In fact, when I was at a Midtown Alliance board meeting in the summer of 2010, and I was speaking to one of my mentors who's on the board with me, and I said, what would you do with Atlantic Station? And he said, burn it. Which was generally the perception of the commercial real estate industry relative to how this asset was struggling. Since then, the retail sales have climbed considerably. Office leasing has returned. Residential has returned in a big way. The Atlantic, which you're going to see later today, is now 98% occupied. It was 5% occupied at that point. Had been foreclosed by Chorus, which then failed and was taken over by FDIC. So virtually every component, with the exception possibly of the office buildings that were relatively stable, were struggling in a big way.
What measures did you have to take to sort of start turning it around? Did you cut prices or cut rents? You re-tenanted some areas?
Well, one of the first things we did was reach out to the community through a social media effort and through a group of, well, about 20 roadshow appearances with all of the neighborhood groups and affiliated stakeholders. So SCAD across the connector is one of the most significant creative class educational institutions in the region. Georgia Tech, the Home Park Neighborhood Association, the Midtown Alliance. Essentially, you could look around in 360 degrees, and we reached out to each of these stakeholders to assess what it is that they thought we needed to do to make it work. And the resounding responses were fix the parking deck, resolve the perception of safety and security, get us better restaurants and retailers, give us local operators, and we set about doing that. So we conceived what we call the 9-point plan, which began with public safety, parking, and re-tenanting. One of the first orders of business was to remove a number of retailers and restaurants who were not resonating with the community, or were what we called bad actors, who were attracting a kind of a late night club crowd that was not in keeping with the residents who called us home.
Was that a lot of those retailers you may have been able to find anywhere, so they didn't really add to the character?
That's exactly right. And the in-town crowd, as Jeff correctly points out, Midtown is Mecca for the creative class in the Southeast, and it is very much where we find a lot of the designers and artists and programmers and others in this type of space. Ogilvy's a great example of that type of group, who move from the suburbs to Midtown because this is the home of their brain trust. But that group is not interested in a vanilla retail offering. So White House Black Market and American Eagle and some of those retailers were first to go because they just didn't fit here. And then we backfilled with local operators who were more in touch with, especially from in a fashion perspective, the style of Midtown relative to the suburban mall.
It seems like there are a lot of more mixed-use projects being done today, and I think that might be for several reasons. I think maybe that people are more in tune with it being density, being smarter growth, and perhaps that we have more sites that need to be redeveloped. I know in my coverage of the shopping mall industry, there are a lot of regional malls that cities want to redevelop as mixed use, but there's obviously, it's tricky to get right. What would you say are some of the most challenging things to get right, and what are some of the things in mixed use that people often mishandle?
I think the key from this perspective is that you're building essentially a community. So especially if you have residents on site, office workers, hotels. Here at Atlantic Station, we call it a city within a city. We've got our own zip code. We would be the 14th largest city in Georgia if we were incorporated. 10,000 residents live and work here every day, and we got 1.5 million square feet of office, 1.5 million square feet of retail. That requires a very active, hands-on experience police, if you will. Our group is engaged in creating an experience for our guest. Our customer is our retailer or our office tenant or our hotel guest. Their customer is our guest. So if they come on our property to shop, our job is to create an environment that is memorable and makes them feel good. And you'll get a feel for that when we tour later. And extend their stay. The difference, especially in the retail aspect, is as opposed to convenience, park in front of the store, run in, run out, get your stuff and leave, our approach is to extend the dwell time and get them to spend more money because we're driving sales. I think what that requires is a high level of control. And what we see in many mixed-use environments is that the developer sells a piece to a hotel operator, sells a piece to a condo tower developer, sells a piece to a retail developer, and really is just stacking the pieces up either vertically or horizontally, but is not maintaining control of the experience on the street. That we see as the biggest failing. And here at Atlantic Station, because all the streets are private and we own all the public space, we can deploy the experience however we see fit. And we're taking a page out of Rick Caruso's The Book of the Grove in following those who do it best.
And the streets are private. And I wonder, with this type of project, they tend to be more expensive because they're so dense and so many different uses. Is there always going to be a need for some type of public subsidy or tax increment financing for this type of project, or can a mixed-use redevelopment project be done entirely privately?
I think the subsidy is almost always going to be a requirement. In this case, a tax allocation district was created to fund all of the infrastructure, the parking decks and the streets and so forth. We're under construction with a project in a North Atlanta suburb called Avalon, which was not subsidized, but we were, again, able to buy it at a reset basis at 23 cents on the dollar after a foreclosure by Wells Fargo. In that case, we've got room to create a reasonable return without a subsidy. But in most cases, especially in an urban environment where the density and the land value is so high, you've got to have help.
For parking primarily, probably?
All the infrastructure, that, especially if we're sitting on, well, we're 21 floors above it. We're sitting on an 11-acre parking deck with 7,200 cars. And that in and of itself is a significant investment that in this case, the tax allocation district made on behalf of Atlantic Station.
There's maybe one last question from me for you. And you already segued into it about Avalon and how that ground up development, how does that differ from what you purchased and redid here at Atlantic Station?
What we say is that at Atlantic Station, we bought the box and created the experience around it. At Avalon, we're creating the experience and building the box around it. So that to the extent that, for instance, our Central Park is slightly too small to fit a skating rink or a tennis court or whatever activation we may require, we've changed that at Avalon. So we're able to build the physical space. The other thing is that we've used Atlantic Station as an incubator for all these experiential tricks of the trade. And through our study of the Grove and Santana Row and all those others, we were able to knock them off, literally. So the boulevard at Avalon is exactly the same boulevard at Santana Row and San Jose. Our plaza is almost a direct facsimile of the plaza at Americana at Brand and Glendale. So we were able to study those properties and copy their best practices.